The 45-hour rail journey from the smog and grime of Beijing West Station to the cerulean splendour of Tibet is an epic condensed into 2 days. At daybreak, we indifferently passed the ancient city walls of Xi'an. By tea time, we were surrounded by the lunar landscapes of Lanzhou. The sun went down over Qinghai's vast, empty flatlands, and we began our slow ascent into the Kunlun Mountains just as it rose once more. The train ploughed a lonely path across an undulating landscape of ice and snow at an altitude of 4,500 metres, before descending serenely into Lhasa in time for sunset. All 5 daily trains that cover the Tibetan plateau do so by the light of day. The effect is startling. Suspended in semi-pressurised confinements, surrounded by unworldly permafrost and epic pastures, passengers separated by the fault lines of modern Chinese society find a sense of solidarity. We were businessmen, we were hikers, we were engineers, we were soldiers, we were students, we were sex workers. But within the bubble of China's newest iron rooster, gazing outward, camera in hand, we were all tourists. By such means, the passage to the planet's highest habited region turns out to be a great leveller. Encouraged by tax breaks, non-Tibetan Chinese have flocked to Lhasa in pursuit of land, money and opportunity, making ethnic Tibetans a minority group in their own capital. The ancient neighbourhood of Barkor proved a peephole into what the city may have looked like before it was Sinicized. An indigenous architectural style was evident in the rough, whitewashed walls, but beneath every fluttering window drape were steel bars, a paranoid innovation lifted straight from the handbook of Chinese development. The 13-storey Potala Palace, former winter residence of the Dalai Lama, makes Lhasa the only city in the People's Republic of China where the medieval lords it over the modern. The palace is now run exclusively by the city's Chinese tourist authorities, and Buddhism is all but banned within the palace confines. This is where the 14th Dalai Lama studied, explained the Tibetan guide, gesturing to a desk beside a window that looked out across the whole city. But he was a lazy student. He didn't even learn to read before he fled. Photography is prescribed within the palace, and the authorities are no less careful to control the point of view on the outside. Tourists are forced onto a solitary elevated platform from where the Potala can be seen against a modern and orderly-looking city. I trudged out into the suburbs in search of perspective. The hill from where most brochure shots had been taken was now fenced off behind an iron palisade, protected on one side by a military base, but a row of crumbling factory buildings on the far side offered potential. The door of one such building became a portal to another world. Inside, the floor writhed with dying cuttlefish, waiting to be processed for Lhasa's incongruous seafood restaurants. The boy who would allow me in danced around the narrow skirting and reached back as I clung to the damp walls for balance. We clambered through a hole in the ceiling and up the hill. The shaft of sunlight punched through the cloud cover, dripping a honey glow over the city. Down below, unseen from the road, stood a lonely factory compound. It remained in shadow, while up beyond, half lit in the sunlight, stood the haunted Potala Palace. For 4 hours I waited in the backlots of a suburban bus station, impatient to leave Lhasa. The ticket seller had refused me passage on the basis that, as a foreigner, I was not permitted to travel on my own. Fortunately, there was no shortage of touts to mop up the illegals. Eventually, the private minivan filled to capacity, but nobody on the bus that chugged out of Lhasa in a fog of black exhaust smoke was Tibetan. There was comfort in the fact that other passengers appeared totally inured to life without social securities. They operated, as many millions do in China, in that liminal zone, beyond the letter of the law, but short of criminality. This was the region in which I too now existed. Shigatse was Lhasa Light, another city cleaved into a subdued Tibetan section and a bustling but drab Chinese quarter, though, unlike Lhasa, these two parts at least appeared to meet on something approaching equal terms. In the older half of town, courtyard homes swarmed with a bacterial clamour around the base of another disused feudal palace. Nearby was a Tashulampo monastery, where the public spaces had a Venetian grandeur. However, the prayer halls followed a more subdued blueprint. Tibet's temple interiors often represent a complete inversion of its geography. On the outside, there was a crispness to the texture and shape of the earth. Inside, colours once vivid have been sickened by sallow candlelights. Where the galloping plains present an infinity of choice, the temples channel movement down faded passageways where footsteps ring soft and slow. Even the monks' demonic mantras, smudged together in imprecise harmonies, heighten a sense of blurred reality. Amid the acrid smell of yak butter lamps, Buddhism's retreat into introspection is manifest. Tibet's only other major conurbation, Gyantse, was unambiguously outside the allowed touring zone for foreigners. Here, finally, was a place where the Tibetan sprawl surrounded and subsumed the newer Chinese quarter. At the foot of the city's magnificent central castle, an attendant slept. I quietly shuffled past and climbed into the highest ramparts. If the Potala felt haunted, it was in spite of its polished veneer. Gyantse's castle was a genuine ruin, with broken beams collapsing into catacombs of dust, connected by ladders that had snapped halfway down. I wandered with serendipitous joy, groping around in unlit vaults, and stumbling across glassless windows where a chill wind soughed. I felt like a Bolshevik plundering the Tsar's palace, or a Victorian explorer prizing open an Egyptian tomb. Out in the sun-baked suburbs, schoolchildren played by streams and waved enthusiastic greetings. A gang of labourers sung as they passed adobe bricks along a line before hurling them to a colleague atop the half-finished wall. Tethered cows and chickens lolled in the unpaved alleys. And while the sun was high, the city slept, and there was something quite magical in the quietude. Back in Shigatse, I boarded the bus to Lhasa, but we were just too late for a clean getaway. The governor's cavalcade rolled into town, bringing traffic to a total standstill. Stooges in suits lined the streets ready with red Chinese flags to wave. The Tibetans who surrounded me on the back of the bus consoled themselves in alcohol, taken from a plastic canister more commonly used to store petrol. 2 hours later, finally, on our way, the bottle was still making the rounds. I ended my Tibet odyssey much as I had begun it, trapped in a bubble on a one-day tour of Lake Namso, huddled together with a coachload of Chinese tourists. Where the train journey to the roof of the world had proved the great leveller, a coach ride to the world's highest saltwater lake re-exposed divisions once more. For the duration of the spectacular drive, my fellow passengers chose to close the curtains and watch DVDs of soap operas. In total, we spent 45 minutes beside the lake, an hour and a half in a service station restaurant, 3 hours in shops, and 6 hours in transit. 2 weeks earlier, aboard the train, we were the audience to the natural landscapes. Now, the mountains and plains had been usurped by shopping and photo ops beside browbeaten yak. As we rushed to and fro, it seemed to me that we became the real curiosity, with Tibetans now the spectators. They looked on, half amused, as the world changed around them, directed by a peculiarly hand definition of progress.